Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to All Beer Inside. Our Capital Region adventures are continuing, and we have traveled to the town of Morrow, New York, and joining me today is Rachel and Duffy of Grain Farm Brewery.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
How's it going?
Thank you both very much for hosting us today and speaking about your beer and this amazing view and the farm brewery concept. I look forward to talking to you. First of all, you got 1 year coming up soon, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's a big number, that first year. So how does it feel with everything that's gone on, that 1 year finally coming up?
Oh, it's like a dream. I don't know if I'm waking up from like a dream come true or a nightmare, but no, it's really great. It was a lot of work up to the push of opening last August. Our official opening date was, I think, August 19th, which is really coming up. We celebrated a grand opening at the end of October, so we'll have an anniversary party over Halloween weekend. But yeah, it feels great. It feels like we finally hit our stride. So a lot less stress and a lot more dependability. And Duffy is just really happy to have him here. He's really kind of gotten into his groove of brewing on this system and making some really great beer with the ingredients that we grow, that is the dream, right? So.
Speaking of those beers, you brought me some tasty-looking ones here to try. What am I starting with?
So that first one right there is our Pilsner called Tractor Time.
Okay.
Pretty simple malt bill, obviously using grain grown on site. But yeah, that's our, the minute we put that on tap, it was like, okay, there you got it. That's a staple. Like if that's not on tap, there's some people that come in that are irritated.
You're not the first brewery who said that about one of their beers.
Yeah.
That's awesome, as we do on the show.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Toast.
That beer is actually
So clean.
the number one best-selling beer on the tap list.
Wow. Yeah, I could either be sitting at home watching a movie, out here playing cornhole, or just sitting enjoying the view. This is one of those multifaceted, multi-purpose beers.
Yeah, and what's great about what I love about a beer like that is it's so simple, so it really allows you to like showcase, the malt. You can taste, you can really taste it. It's not meant to be, some people look at it like, oh, it's a light beer, and they think it's just going to be like this, super watery, not very flavorful. And then they drink it, and they're like kind of shocked about how, how flavorful it is. So, that's what I always strive to do.
And I mean, speaking of that, so you literally say field to glass brewery using family grown crops. What made you decide, like, we're going to use, I'm pretty sure, 90% of your own products in those tanks?
Yeah, or more. So actually, the short of the long story is that my family is a cash crop farm in upstate New York, and at its peak, we were farming 2,500 acres, which is quite a bit for us in this side of the state. But within the last 8 to 10 years alone, it's hard to even scrap together 1,000 acres. So, we have a huge investment in grain handling, that's just steel, grain bins and dryers and all that sort of elevator stuff, but then also in tractors and planting and harvesting equipment and everything that goes along with it. So this idea of this field to glass brewery was born out of the fact that we have this expertise in growing grain and we have this huge investment to do the job. And so let's try and do more with less. And the first way to do that is a direct-to-consumer market. And when you're a grain farm, you have two options, basically. You've got booze or you've got bread. And I thought, well, bread's a necessity if there was ever a pandemic again, right? People need to eat bread, but man, people will turn out for booze, right? Oh, yeah. And in fairness, I think the beer does a better job at showcasing the crops that we grow than bread would anyway. So here we are.
Yeah, no, I was very thankful that North America, they allowed booze to remain an essential product, and a lot of brewers I spoke to were like, thank goodness that this got to happen, because a lot of people would have been very, very depressed if that couldn't happen.
For sure.
So, you drink beer in good times, drink beer in bad times.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely an intrinsic part of our culture, of human culture, period, no matter where you go.
Well, and it's like an affordable luxury.
Yes.
That's the thing. Why didn't you do whiskeys first?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's think about it. What's the cost structure?
Yeah. No, I don't know. Craft beer drinkers are small on the market for when it comes to beer, but we're still there, and it's growing. I mean, I think at least it's growing. It's a newer generation that they might not drink as much, but they are going for local.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's a super important part. And your team is obviously ultra local.
Yeah.
There's no question about that.
Yeah.
So, and then so you came from Rachel. You came from the corporate world.
Yeah.
And came back, and I got to save the family farm. What made you? What clicked to do that?
Well, so I was an investment banker. I worked primarily in leveraged buyouts in New York City before coming back. But when I did return, it was kind of like what I just said, right? This idea of what are we going to do with this huge investment if the number of acres that we can secure to grow our crops and to sell commodities continues to shrink. And that became incredibly prevalent when I returned back. There were these New York State farm brewery laws and distillery laws, and it seemed a lot more straightforward at the time than it was, right? The fact is, like, these crops weren't grown in New York State in 100 years. So while we grow small grains like barley and rye and wheats, we don't grow them for germination. We don't grow them so that they reseed. We grow them for feed. So there was a little bit of a learning curve initially, but we did like 5 years of grain trials, twice a year, spring and fall varieties. And I like dragged my dad and my uncle kicking and screaming every single season until we figured out which worked best for us, and now it's kind of smooth sailing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you already knew the soil could grow.
Yep.
So you didn't have to do soil testing and all the other stuff that comes along with trying to grow crops. You're like, okay, we grew there before, we can grow there again. It's just making that adjustment to more, consumable in the fermenters and mash grains.
We focus a lot on like different types of cover crops that like help bring in micronutrients that tend to kind of like, I guess, sink down over like generations of crop farming. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we have the expertise, we have the land base, we made those investments.
Yeah. Okay.
So now it's just kind of changing the way we think about what we're growing.
I mean, plus your family has owned the land for decades upon decades. You don't want to give that up, right?
No.
It's
no.
That would be literally like ripping your heart out in a sense. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's one of those things we can't, especially in New York State, between solar, residential development, the price of land is not conducive to growing and selling commodities. We're talking about what is the definition of a commodity? It's something that essentially has no value unless it's in huge quantities. Well, if we don't have the land base or can't afford the land base for huge quantities, how do you make a return on your investment with a smaller quantity of product? And that's turning it into something that's value added. So beer to us is a value added agricultural product, really.
And then you come back, you start growing the crops. We're going to open a brewery. Things are chugging along. World shuts down, March 2020.
It was fun.
Like, how does that, all of a sudden you're up and you're kicking butt and then just screaming halt?
Well, the timeline of events occurred like this. I applied for my local permits in September. We received approval in January. We submitted the building plans March 3rd, and the state shut down on the 14th.
Oh my gosh.
So we had, 50,000 wrapped up in engineering and like legal and permitting before everything just stopped. And I was 8 months pregnant too. So part of that, like, very scary time was time that I did honestly personally need because I had a baby. And the reality is, like, man, that would have been difficult. But it did delay the project quite a bit. Like, we didn't get our building permit until August.
Okay.
And by then, New York State had called back all the contractors. They couldn't work on site, so we couldn't hire a contractor. It was a disaster. The good news is, like, between like the farm and my grandfather and all, again, tractor trailers and lowboys and all the equipment that they have at their disposal, we were able to do everything but the floor in-house. We had to hire the floor out because we're not masons, right? So he was 85 at the time, my 85-year-old grandfather and I went to go pick up the lumber load.
Wow.
Because we couldn't get it delivered. We had to go pick it up ourselves. It was like 2 hours away. It was the only mill in New York State that had 20-foot boards. We need 20 foot for the span.
Yeah.
I called every single yard in New York State, and this was the only one that had 20-foot logs.
And that's, I'm assuming, when the wood prices were way up there on top of that?
Honestly, I don't know, because I don't know the historical wood prices, but I have a sneaking suspicion that, like, this was right before they went through the roof, right? So, yeah, stuff like that. You know, I've got pictures. I can send them to you, but, like, it's my uncle, my grandfather, and I, like, literally building this porch in January, like, of 2021. And, yeah, it was definitely an all-hands-on-deck family affair. My husband and I, actually, in April of 2021, because we had to do the house at the same time. So this was, like, a nightmare. We ended up buying a camper because we were 40 minutes away. We couldn't be up here with a 1-year-old. So we, like, took our kid out of the crib and we're like, guess you're living in a bunk bed now, and moved into a camper with our cats and dog just to, like, literally work on this project ourselves. So we should have had, like, a reality TV show. I don't know. We are electricians. We are plumbers. We are carpenters. We can do, there's, like, kind of nothing we can't do at this point. It's a matter of, like, how scary of a job is it, right? Like, do I want to put that screwdriver in that electrical panel? I don't know.
But then that's the nice part about having YouTube, is a lot of pros actually show their trades online. So that's a real benefit when you're like, oh, thankfully I can watch this video, and hopefully this guy knows what he's talking about. Yeah. Maybe watch the guy with 5 million views versus the guy with 5 views. So.
Right. I think we own every tool that exists now. Where they're located, I don't know. I'm severely ADHD, so you might walk around for an hour looking for it, but yeah.
I'm guessing, too, just building stuff, and you're looking at your baby, and you're like, this is yours. You better enjoy this in the future.
It was funny. My friend's joke. It's like, wow, that's the only, he just turned 3, but, that's the only 2-year-old in the world that says, Mom, can we go to the brewery?
Yeah, right.
When I have a kid,
Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to another beer here. And then, Duffy, I want to find out about your brewing history. So, what's number 2 we got
next beer here is our Spinning Jenny Pale Ale. That was it's meant to be super classic, quintessential American-style pale ale.
It's a little malty, not overly hoppy.
Yep.
Awesome.
Classic hops in there. Nothing, no glamour hops
cheers. That's
in
what I'm drinking.
That's awesome.
It's funny. A lot of this beer stuff has to do with marketing, which we don't have a marketing background, either one of us. And I was like, man, why isn't that Spinning Jenny selling more? Why isn't it selling more? I was like, I gotta think about how to market this. And so we did a post with just him and the beer, and we just, like, reframed it, like, drink what he drinks.
Yeah, because that's, like, my go-to for most of the time.
And then it's number 2, overnight. Yeah. You know, so a lot of this is just like.
Well, and especially like a style like this. I mean, kind of like what I pride myself over what we do here is I try to really make sure I have an extremely diverse tap list. So I think a lot of people come in, and especially some of the people who, really haven't been drinking craft beer for that long. Sometimes they're like, well, it's not hazy, I don't know, and I don't like that's what it's supposed. This is what it's supposed to taste like. And I really love it when I get, like, some old dude that comes in here. It's like, oh my God, thanks for making a beer like that. Like, nobody's making beer like that anymore. And I think that's kind of like, everyone's always asking, like, what's the next direction? What's the next direction? And I truly think it's going to be a matter, we're going to get to a point in time where, it's going to be a matter of, can you make a true to style this? Can you make a true to style that? And that's what people are gonna want. Obviously, a lot of the crazy beers that are out now, I mean, they're not going anywhere. I mean, they're just. I think the beer's going to keep going in weird directions. But I also feel that there's a large section of the consumer base that is like, I'm tired of all this. And they see this and they're like, wow. And it's amazing to see how many people haven't been exposed to, like, really true classical styles, because the lines are so blurred nowadays. So it's like when somebody comes like, oh man, I'm like, yeah, man, like, it's an old school beer right there.
I mean, when it comes to my own personal beer tasting, is if I go somewhere, I always start with either like a Pilsner or a lager, and then maybe a sour, and then a New England, and then maybe finish off with a stout or something.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's still time.
There's lots And what I love is the diversity that beer has, and I do find craft beer is more welcoming to bringing in diversity. You know, if we're for the beer drinkers, and unfortunately at this time, brewing is predominantly a male-focused industry. So I'm sure you hear a lot of, oh, well, you're a woman owner. You don't know what you're talking about.
We'll get to that question. We'll get to that question.
And it's totally...
People come in and automatically want to talk to me. I'm like, I don't own it.
Yeah. There's absolutely no need for that anymore. Like, we're in 2023. Grow up.
Yeah.
I mean...
Well, and the other thing, too, which I've been saying for a long time, is, like, women have different palates than men do.
It's actually... There's a study where women actually do have stronger palates than men do.
Yeah.
So, but yet I think there's only 2 Master Cicerones that are female in Canada. Huh. I don't know about the U.S., but we only have 2 in Canada.
Well, I think there's only there's not even 20 worldwide.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's saying something right there.
Yeah.
So Duffy's history.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So where'd you start? Where'd craft beer journey begin and coming here?
So, I'm gonna try to make this as concise as I can, but I mean, pretty classic beginning with home brewing. But I didn't start with home brewing first. I started by going to my first craft beer festival first, and I mean, this was like way back in the early 2000s. My wife had a friend that lived in Boston. Calls her up, hey, you want to go to this extreme beer festival?
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know what year it was, but it was probably like one of the first ones that the Alstroms had down there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what's a beer festival? You know, I always...
Why is it extreme?
Yeah, you know, and I always kind of had an affinity...
What's going on there? I'm picturing like water slides.
You're like, like screaming at the beer.
The topless women.
But it's like I kind of always had an affinity of like what good beer was. Like even though I wasn't drinking like super crafty stuff, like I drank Guinness, I drank Sam Adams, I drank stuff like that. So I go in it and I was just blown away. You know, I was just like, oh my God. So I mean, the first thing I did was go to like my local beverage center and just literally tell them like, hey man, I just went to my first beer festival yesterday, and they just point me in the right direction. And literally a couple months later, I go to another beer festival held by Beer Advocate. It was like their craft beers, a little bit more widely, it wasn't like specific. It was like
less extreme.
Yeah, it was just like craft beer festival. And this was when, Dogfish. I mean, they were definitely popular at the time, but they were still it was still Sam standing by himself behind the booth. So everyone was like, you got to check Dogfish out. So I made a beeline, and I talked to Sam for like 20 minutes, and he was just like, listen, man, if you want to have a better appreciation for beer in of itself, like just start homebrewing. And that was the end. That was the end. I went 2 days later, went out, got a homebrew kit, and
How many terrible batches of beer did you make before you made a good batch of beer?
Yeah.
I mean, the problem I had was like, you're making 5 gallons at a time, and it's just like, I was just going crazy. So I was like, just giving beer away, dumping it down the drain. I mean, a lot of the stuff is just trial and error. I just want to try and see if this works or not. And I made plenty of terrible beer.
But you have education background.
Yeah, but that was after the fact. So like, after doing that for a while and being in a dead-end job and being in like my early 30s and going like, oh, man, what am I
this life sucks. What can I do?
Like I had a great job. I was making good money. I had like 6 weeks paid vacation. Like, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And but I was miserable every day. Absolutely miserable every day. And I was just like, just started kind of entertaining the idea, like what would be the steps I would have to make to do this professionally. And, the first thing I did was just go into all the local breweries, be like, hey, let me just scrub your floors, let me just get the foot in the door. And after not really getting a lot of feedback that way, I started looking into schools, and I came across the American Brewers Guild in Middlebury, Vermont.
Okay.
And signed up for that. I had to sit down and talk with the wife, and she's just like, yeah, no, you owe it to yourself. You know what I mean? And did that, got a formal brewing education, spent some time out in California, and then immediately did an apprenticeship at Brewery Gang in Cooperstown.
Okay.
I was there for like a couple months, And after that, started brewing in a small, I don't know if you've ever heard of Chatham Brewing Company, or in Chatham, New York. They're decent.
They've been there for a while.
Yeah, they've been there for a while. So I was there fairly early on with them for like a year and a half, and then I don't know if you're familiar with the whole schmaltz story, but they were.
Bigger brewery.
Yeah,
in Clifton Park by off the exit, was that 10?
Yeah, so for the longest time, Jeremy Cowan, the owner of Schmaltz, he was pretty much like the poster boy for contract brewing.
Okay.
Like he didn't own, he owned the business, owned the brand, but he was having somebody else brew his beer for him. And then he got to the point where he was like, well, I'll open my own facility. And I got hired there only maybe a couple months after they opened. In 2013, and then after a few years of that, he wanted to get out of the business, so he sold the facility to Single Cut Beersmiths out of Astoria, Queens. Mm-hmm. And so I was the head. I worked my way up at Schmaltz to head brewer, and then when Single Cut took the facility over, I stayed on as head brewer. And, I loved it there. It was great company to work for, making awesome beer. I loved everybody I worked for. But at the same time, I was getting to that point where I wasn't doing any of the work anymore. I was just kind of like sitting at a desk, making the schedule, doing a lot of administrative stuff.
Yeah. Making other people's beer.
Yeah, and we were doing a lot of contracting. And it just, I got to the point where I'm just like, this isn't, I was feeling stagnant. And I was just like, I need to figure out something else to do, and the opportunity here came along, and it was just like it was a godsend. It was like it's kind of funny. I talked to some of the friends I have that have been in the industry for a while, and they went from smaller facility to medium facility to big facility. Yeah. And they're like, dude, you're doing it backwards. I'm like, no, this is exactly where I wanted to end up. Like, even when I was home brewing and fantasizing about working, I'm like, I just want to work, at a local place, be part of the local scene, not do anything, I mean, obviously there's still the option of, someday expanding here. Yeah. But at the same time, like, you get that feeling where you're working, you feel like you're working in a factory. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that feeling. It's every day is a little different. I've got a lot of the creative control.
You get to drive a tractor.
I get to drive a tractor. I mean,
that's kind of a plus.
So
gets to basically work outside in weather like today.
Yeah, and I love it. I'm thankful for it every day because not too many people, A, get to do what they want to do in life, and then B, even if they're in the field that they want to do, really working somewhere where they're truly satisfied, and there's nothing better than, at the end of the day, just kind of looking around and seeing everybody, enjoying the product that you make, and it's just like that's huge for me.
I'm guessing it's difficult to work with this view.
It's horrible.
It must be the worst.
I keep telling her to put blinds on the windows because I don't want to see.
Just blackout curtains.
No, there's definitely some days where
Board it up.
Yeah, I come in and then there's I got to fill a tank up with water and I'll just stand out here for a minute. Just
that sounds terrible.
Yeah, or I'll have a brewer, a friend of mine from the industry, come and be like, "Oh man, like."
I'm stuck in a warehouse.
Yeah, pretty much, So don't believe me. That's not lost on me for a minute. So, but and I get to brew. I mean, there's the staples that we keep on all the time, and she's got her ideas that that she wants me to incorporate into something. But pretty much other than that, it's just like, hey, Rachel, let's brew this. Okay, So
does it meet my objectives? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it drinkable? Will the locals like it? Will people who are visiting like it?
Yeah.
That's in the end is what
so
you need,
I mean,
right?
and again, we're not even a full year in yet, so we're still trying to figure out like, okay, what are we going to keep on all the time? What are we going to rotate out? All that kind of stuff. So
I'm sure there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of tweaks and changes and stuff that you've had to do in this first year that you're like, okay, well, maybe the investment banking thing. No, that's the corporate world. I don't want to go back to that. So.
Yeah, left a lot of money behind. Put it all into this baby.
Mm-hmm.
So you go by the motto, for the land, for the spirit. Mm-hmm. How was that created? Where did that come about?
Well, again, not a marketing person, and when I engaged a local marketing company, Black Dog, to help me kind of focus my brand, because it was everything, we just started spitballing. Like, what is the purpose? Like, what is your mission? And the mission is essentially to save the family farming tradition, but it's bigger than that, right? It's like, if we don't take care of Mother Nature, she's not going to give to us what we need. So there's a very symbiotic relationship between the two. I have to invest in her, she'll invest in me, hopefully, right? Mm-hmm. That's the hope. And so that's how the slogan came out, right? We're doing this for the land. You know, the spirit is it's our spirit, right? But it's also the spirit.
Oh,
it's
so
the
spirit. Okay,
yeah. It's a play on words too. And
that's awesome.
And so we want to celebrate everything that we do on site because it preserves the land for the future. And if it's not my farm, if it's not my family, like hopefully it's somebody else's, right?
Yeah. Hopefully somebody passionate about doing farming.
Right. Like hopefully it's not a bunch of houses and solar panels and maybe some solar panels to
maybe an occasional
be renewable. But
yeah,
right. Like this is just like the idea is we're doing this to preserve this land for the future. And it's funny because we're just kind of like scratching the surface of how that kind of brand and awareness is really resonating with people. We had a volunteer weekend. These old barns are full of like trinkets from farmers past. And we launched, I think we gave like 3 weeks notice to the public, but a volunteer day to get it cleaned out because we'd like to turn it into something someday. Mm-hmm. And I think it was like 25 people turn out to do it, but they showed up to work. Yeah. They were not, I did not need to push them around. It was like, holy cow, these people know what's going on. Yeah. They stayed out of the, I was running the equipment just to get stuff picked up. They stayed out of my way. They had sledgehammers. They had chainsaws. I mean, they were going at it. And they thanked me.
Wow.
And it's not the first time in the last year that somebody has thanked me for like building this brewery. I mean, last week they thanked me for allowing them to participate in something that we're doing here. And there's this photo of me that one of the people took. And it's like kind of that moment of like, it's almost overwhelming. Yeah. Like, why are you thinking, like, I'm thanking you. Like, what do you mean right now, right? And I think that it's resonating with people that this is a community-oriented project, and it is a very mission-centric brewery. This isn't just like we're making beer. Yeah. Like, we want to preserve our family operation. We want this land to stay farming. We want to reinvest in these buildings because they're an eyesore, and we want you to come to our home. Mm-hmm. This is our backyard. We want to share it with you. And so that is a bit of a different take than I think a lot of other, breweries that we engage with, and that's fine. But it is like true to our core. It's like the authentic part of our business model, right?
Yeah. Well, if it were for those people helping and coming to drink your beer, where would you be, right?
Exactly. And I hope that they understand how thankful and grateful we are, because every dollar they spend, right, is every opportunity that we have for the future. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned sustainable farming being kind of keeping the crops healthy, which is important, but how much adapting have you had to do with climate change?
Actually, good question. This year is this last barley season was the first season that even like my dad, my grandfather, and my uncle have like a combined, 150 years of farming.
Sounds about right.
And it's the first year that we basically lost a crop to heaving. And heaving is essentially where the ground pushes the seed out. We focus on planting winter barley. So you seed it in September, like your grass at home. It grows, and then it dies, and it comes back, right? It basically goes dormant. And that has been the most successful season for us because of weed suppression. we don't want to dump a bunch of herbicides on our land if we don't have to. So if we can get our crop in early, then we don't have to do any herbicides. It's awesome. Well, the ground never froze this year. And there's literally nothing I can do about that. This isn't like, oh, you should have rolled it in, or you should have planted this way, or you should have disked. No. The ground did not freeze. And what happens is in a winter like we had, you'll get, 30-degree temperatures at night, so freezing the first 4 inches or so, and thawing, freezing, and it pushes the barn. So we lost 50% of our crop right out the gate from heaving. We put a cover crop in, which is what you see here because we no-tilled our sunflowers into a cover crop. And then we had significantly lower yields because it was a really, really early spring, and because of broadly speaking, heaving affected all of the barley. It was just the stuff laying on top was about 50%. And we did get a bunch of suppression from outside native species and stuff, I guess, coming in and plucking them out. Birds, I wouldn't believe the birds that would land in here last fall, just pulling barley out.
And there's none today whatsoever. But
Nope, none today.
And then I also saw that you kind of use sunflowers as a natural pest deterrent as well.
We use it as a crop rotation or cover crop. So in order to kind of reduce our reliance on herbicides, you have to keep the ground covered. And what you try to do is cover it with something that isn't the same thing over and over, right? We don't want a monocrop because that just essentially builds up resistance by bugs or diseases that might live in the soil, because there's a lot of soil-borne diseases. It's just a fact of life, people. Every vegetable, every grain, you're battling soil-borne diseases. So sunflowers is a unique one. We did a trial last year. Half the field was sunflowers, half the field was buckwheat. And sunflowers we chose because of their the nature to be very short season. So they're 40 to 50 days. And if we want to do a winter barley, we have about 60 days from harvest to the next seeding. And buckwheat because of its nitrogen fixing capabilities. Cool. Sunflowers also have the benefit of, they have a taproot. So they basically reduce compaction in your soil, which is pretty cool. And because of that taproot, if you leave the vegetation, right, you mow it, let's say instead, it brings up all the micronutrients that tend to drift down to the deeper depths of your soil. So that's why we did that. And then the unintended consequences are we have to have sunflowers every year now.
But now you have Sunflower Fest.
And now we have a Sunflower Fest, which will be basically all of September. Today we actually open our flower picking field, our little side garden that is also full of sunflowers. Yeah,
that's awesome. Plus you do the hashtag brews and views, and clearly brews, which we'll get to the next one, and views. So that's it seems all about how do we draw people here? This and this patio and the heated centers, and the inside's super nice too. So it's just the draw is ultimately, I think, out here for people who
for sure. Sunsets, for sure. Yeah. Sunsets.
So I discovered you through the craft beer passport for the Capital Region, but also things like that and the New York State Brewing app. How beneficial have those been to draw complete strangers like myself here to Dance of Grain?
I don't know. I have no way to measure that.
Yeah,
I don't get a lot of people saying that to me.
Okay.
I get a lot of people being like, "It's our first time. We didn't know you were here."
Yeah.
It's a challenge and it's not a challenge at the same time. Communicating with the public is, I think we probably need to invest in some search engine stuff.
Yeah.
It's expensive. You don't know really there's no way to measure your ROI.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a difficult thing.
SEOs are not cheap.
Yeah, they're not cheap. But we do I changed the POS system from last fall to now, and I send out an email every week the same time, and every week our list grows. I think we have 1,500 subscribers now, which is pretty good for not even a year in. We don't buy them, right? It's people signing up right here. And it'll tell me how much money that email generated, right? Based on who saw it, who clicked on it, whatever, and those people who came in and what they spent. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, we need to we'll boost posts, or we'll do Facebook ad manager, but and we work with like the chambers of commerce to help post things. But I think the next step is like, all right, how much money, how many cents per pint are we putting into our marketing budget for 2024 so that we can invest in like SEO, SEM, really targeted marketing to get those people, because we're really not far from Saratoga, we're not far from Lake George or Glens Falls. A lot of the newbies we get happen to be coming off the north, they're coming from New York to go to the Adirondacks, and this was right off the highway. We don't have to go through a downtown or a main street, and it's exactly what they're looking for. Right?
That's awesome.
It's quiet, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beer is good.
Or the other cool draw that we get. I mean, literally like right over there is a state campground.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's almost a weekly.
They get like 500,000 visitors a summer.
Yeah.
Wow.
So somebody will just roll in. I'm like, I'm at the campgrounds over here.
Yeah, we like give them little brochures, and
Yeah.
they love handing them out. So people will come over from there quite a bit.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's
awesome.
That's fun. 'Cause
Yeah, I'm sure buy a few cans or crowlers and sit by their own campfire at their
Absolutely.
campground.
And what always inevitably happens, like one person shows up just to kind of scout the place out, and then like a whole group shows up later. And you're like,
Just they're there on their phone, like, cool, like
Yeah.
12 more people.
yeah,
Honestly, though, people love it because it's very family friendly. It's like we put up these no-climb fences because it was so family friendly that I was worried about children getting smushed by cars. So now I have them locked in. But no, there's not a lot of places you can go and have a beer and get some food, or bring your food and just hang with your kids. Like, you don't get to see your friends anymore because you got kids, right?
yeah.
It's a good option for people who have a family.
So let's get to this next beer, and then we're going to speak about the food, because I know you do food trucks.
Yep.
So I'm very interested in that selection process.
Yeah.
But let's get to Santé.
Yeah, so the next one, Santé, it's Belgian wit, but it's kind of like my take on it. So I used lemon zest instead of like orange peel, and then I also dry hopped it with Hallertau Blanc.
Nice.
To give it a little different element.
Awesome. A toast.
Yes.
Toast.
Yeah, this is like one of those things where we talked about, and Duffy was like, I'm going to do a Belgian wit, blah, blah, blah. I was like, is that like, again, not a beer background. Like, I'm learning a lot through Duffy, but I don't have a beer background. I'm like a Hogarten? He's like, yeah.
Kind of.
Sort of. I was like, well, I always put lemon in it.
Yeah.
He's like, I guess we're putting lemon in
Yeah,
it.
no, it's fine.
Right?
Just naturally have the lemon zest instead of throwing it in, and so you're not throwing lemon on top of the orange and coriander.
Yeah. And I didn't put any spices in that. It's just special yeasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very unique wit. I haven't had many like that.
Yeah,
so.
good. Thank you.
So food trucks. I noticed on the website, it looks like you seem to have a rotating food truck every couple of weeks, once per month.
Yeah, we have. So we have a food truck every weekend.
Okay.
Kind of depends seasonally, whether they're here Thursday through Sunday or Friday through Sunday. But last weekend was the burger guy. This weekend is the barbecue guy. Mostly does like beef barbecue. We've got a pork guy too who rotates in and out. He was here, what was that, last weekend? No, weekend before last.
Yeah.
Then we've got Mexican, Tres Mijas, who's also a fan favorite. And we like sneak in Moby Dick's, which is like a fish fry wagon every now and then. They'll be back in September. And Thursdays, there's like a couple Thursdays coming up that we've got like a Czechoslovakian like pop-up.
They've been here a couple times. Yeah, stuff
They
smells.
do like open face sandwiches and strudels and basically very authentic Czech food. So those are all booked to the end of September, and then we've got to start thinking about like, okay, who's going to be our vendor for the winter time, because nobody wants to park when it's cold out. Yeah. So it's like we've got to work with somebody who's like a preferred vendor to get through the season. But when we don't have food trucks, we definitely welcome people to bring in their own food because, why not? What the hell?
Yeah, right.
I mean, do you see putting a kitchen in the future at some point?
I don't know. I live under the philosophy of know what you do well and do that.
Okay.
I could see us doing something like, again, going back to like what supports our initiative, maybe doing bread.
Okay.
Right? And then being like, okay, let's make some really great sandwiches. and working with some local meats and whatnot. But I don't know if it'll ever be like a full scale kitchen situation.
You see yourself working with like local like charcuterie type boards with meats and cheeses and stuff. I mean, you're in the farmland.
Yeah,
right?
we
it's all there,
actually
so.
we're gonna open with that.
Okay.
And it was like the 11th hour. One of my very good friends was here last summer, and she stayed all summer, did not take a dime from us, just helping. And she had this. It was like late July, and she's like, "I need to have a conversation with you. I really don't think you should do charcuterie."
Okay.
And I was like, "Why?" She's like, "There's just a lot going on. You've never been in hospitality. You haven't been in beer before, and like adding this to the mix with a pretty inexperienced team is gonna throw you over the edge.
Yeah.
Like, you just need to not." And I begrudgingly took her advice. I was like really kind of mad, but I got over it real quick when we opened, and my life turned into complete chaos. So yeah, but we have like, I don't know, we'll have chips, but generally speaking, it's like bring your own food, or we have a food truck. We post our calendar once a week, and we'll post the menu when received from the vendor. And if you've got food restrictions, no one's gonna murder you for bringing your own stuff, right? Like, if you're vegetarian and it's barbecue and you can't eat it, bring your own food.
Yeah. That's pretty simple. I like that concept. It's a lot easier. And on top of that too, your team has like regular events. I saw beer dinners, music. Well, how regular are those events? And then what are some things you might want to add on? I see cornhole, maybe cornhole tournaments. Like, do you see yourself doing that?
So we have live music at least once a week, if not twice at this point, all through the end of September. We have the Sunflower Fest for September and October this year, and there'll be a number of different sort of like either events or activities, workshops focused around that, and we're hosting a beer dinner during that festival. We do have 2 sets of cornhole, but I think for me and like my initiative and this idea of like for the land, for the spirit, this idea of celebration, I would like to bring in more like music and arts to our place, because in line with that, it's complementary. I used to be a musician. I'm no longer a musician, but that barn is perfect for things like, art festivals or beer fests, or I just really see this place as like a destination for celebrating anything and everything. And that's kind of what I want to target.
No, it pretty much, it's been said at other breweries, but craft beer is beer and art in glass.
Yeah.
So it's why not add actual art?
It's funny because it's the like literal words I use is like beer is the canvas for telling the story of what we do as farmers, right? And he's the artist. I'm just facilitating it all.
Trying to be his sales rep. Putting him in a gallery here and there.
Right.
Kind of speaking of galleries, have you done festivals, or is there festivals in the future at Dancing Grain?
Yeah, we did the New York Craft Beer Fest. We did the Saratoga Beer Week Beer Fest. We did the Farming Man. But I don't know what the fall has going on. We like, personally, my hope is that we'll be having festivals here.
That would be cool.
It's such a good draw, especially like what's going on out here, and it does a really good job of telling the story of beer, and I think that would help. I mean, that elevates everybody in beer, right? For me, of course, I have like a little bit of a personal objective, which is to highlight the ingredients that go into beer. So I don't know if, how those festivals will take place. Will they be only breweries that use New York State ingredients? Will they be, beer fest focused on like lagers and ales, and maybe not IPA? What is it? What does our brand dictate in a year from now when we're a little bit more mature? I think is still to be determined, but we like where we are in what we're producing, and both at the farm and on our tap. They're very complementary, and I think that as we mature, we'll probably be focusing more on lagers and ales.
Awesome. All right, let's get this one last beer. And there was a question I forgot earlier, which I'm going to ask, and we'll go from there. So what's this last beer?
So the last one, that's the Sweet Bee. Okay, all right. So that's actually the first, when I started here back in, what was it, March? Late March, early April, something like that. That was the first beer that I designed, and Rachel was literally just like, I've got this 50-pound bucket of honey sitting in the
Can you do
cooler.
something
Can
with
you do
it,
something
please?
with it? I'm like, yeah. So local honey. There's another local farmer that Rachel allows them to keep hives on site. So it's kind of cool because every time I do it, the honey's a little different throughout the year.
Well, and what's cool about it, so this is like, I would say as close to an estate beer as we can get right now. This and then probably the Norwood, which you can have a sample on your way out. It's so those bees ate off the sunflowers all last fall.
Okay.
They live on site, and as gratitude for letting them live on site, they would give us a 5-gallon pail every year. And so that's what it was. They gave me a pail in the spring, and I said, Duffy, do something with this. So it's rye and malt from the farm and the honey from the farm. And it's our take on what, like, if we made an IPA, this is what it would be. It wouldn't be a hazy IPA necessarily.
Yeah, and I kind of tried to make it look like, we had a jar of honey in your hand,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Ooh,
All right.
cheers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, like rye honey,
Yum.
super well balanced.
Yum.
Wow.
That's one of my.
What's the percentage on this?
It's like 6.5.
That could be
like
dangerous because that does not taste 6.5. That's a good campfire beer for me. It's
Cool.
sit by the campfire and I'm snooty. I have to have my beer in a glass even when I'm at a campfire. So it's like crack open the crowler, pour it, put my crowler back in my ice to keep it a little cooler.
Yeah. No, I'm a pretty avid camper too. All my friends will pick on me. I'll pull up like, oh, here, Duffy got to pull his glass out. Can't.
Yeah, I'm catching flack now too because I do it for disc golf with the guys. It's like I break out my little can and I got a little topper on it. They're like, dude, I'm like, what? At least I'm enjoying myself and I'm supporting a local company.
Exactly.
Local disc golf fields. Leave me alone. So the name Dancing Grain, where does it come from, and who's the logo?
So Dancing Grain, we had a lot of names. And we took a short list of 10, and we launched it to like 70 of our friends and family, and we took a poll. And Dancing Grain actually came back as one of the top 3. It wasn't the number 1. But Dancing Grain comes from basically what you get to see in the fields if you're here before July 4th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is exactly that, dancing grain. When the wind blows and the barley heads out, it has this huge anther. It's beautiful, and it just swirls, and and it is.
And sometimes it looks like there's
it's like you look at it, you're like meditating, and you don't even know what's happening, right?
Yeah. And sometimes you can see it looks like waves going across the field. It's
so
the
Dancing
the
Grain.
movie intro's the
Yeah, exactly.
And who's the logo?
The logo is like sort of. It's mostly based off of Mother Nature. It's kind of loosely formed into being kind of me. It's my brewery, but it has everything to do with like life, right? Like for the land, for the spirit. Great beer grown here. It's like if we give her what she needs, she'll give us what we need. And it's a very male-dominated industry. I am in the middle again. Yeah. I don't know how I find myself here all the time. I've got agriculture, which is predominantly male, and beer, which is predominantly male, and I am in the middle of the two. And I recall very early on the business planning process, more than one guy telling me, I see that you're targeting women. That's gonna kick you in the ass, right? And I was like, I don't know, I feel like that is what's kicking you in the ass, but okay.
Yeah.
And over 75% of all of our followers on socials, either platforms, are women. And what I can tell you is that if a woman resonates with a brand, she's coming back more than once. She's bringing her friends, she's bringing her family, she's bringing her kids, she's bringing her husband. I'm going to get her husband anyway.
Yeah.
If I just go after him, if I target that guy, it's beer. It's a farm. I'm going to get him, right?
Or
so if I can get her,
and
I have a loyal customer for life.
Yeah, brand loyalty is so important.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's the husband or the boyfriend bringing the wife or girlfriend. I'm like, I don't really like beer. I'm like, try that.
Yeah, you might like that.
Try
this
that.
was inspired by somebody
goodness.
who shares in your principles.
Yeah, and especially like some of the sours that we do are very approachable, and a lot of the, that's why I always push on somebody when a woman comes in like, I don't really like beer. I'm like, try this. It's almost like champagne.
We do have to call them beer champagne.
Yeah.
But that usually, if it's at a little bit of like arm twisting, like, listen, it's more like beer champagne.
Yeah.
They're like, all right, that's what I want. That's what I can't. That's
And then
what I'm
they
looking
try
for.
it. They're like, oh, I never knew that beer could
Right.
taste like this, and it just opens their mind up to, and I enjoy that about this too. Just having people come in, and especially having a huge variety of beer, and people are like, I really don't know what that is. We're like, well, try it. It's like people, I like to produce beers that a lot of times people otherwise might normally not be exposed to. Again, harkening back to doing some like really true to style stuff, and some people are like, that's a weird beer. I'm like, people have been making beer like that for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Like,
Santé.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Do you, with the popularity of seltzers, do you see yourself making a seltzer?
No.
No?
No.
Ah, interesting. It's rare because a lot of people are making them now because
It
of
does. It just
the
doesn't
popularity.
align with like our mission.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now there is an opportunity. There's a guy in Vermont that toll processes sweet sorghum. So if I could figure out how to harvest it, because again, all my harvesters harvest dry grains, not wet. So I figure sweet sorghum is kind of like a maple syrup. You have to harvest it when it's wet, boil it down. If I could figure out how to get it off the ground, then we would have our own base of sugar.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I have no interest in like buying Domino sugar like everybody else and making a seltzer. That's just not. That
You're
does
just-
not align with what we're
So
here to do.
You're literally, we're staying field to glass. And
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
No, there's no need to deviate. And I'm sure you have quite the loyal customers.
Oh yeah.
And is that where the loyalty program is coming along?
Well, the loyalty program works out really well. We started with like a Crowler program, right? Like a milk card sort of situation. And then we changed point of sale systems. And this works out so much better because you're collecting their data and you know what they want. And they get a point for every dollar they spend. After 100 points, they get $10 towards their next tab. So it's like, I've got people who, it's like 500 or 600 points that they haven't used because their daughter's coming in 3 weeks with all their family and they want to come and have a big party, right? And so the loyalty program has actually worked out really well because it's capturing all of their likes and dislikes and it's aggregating our consumer preferences for us, and then quantifying basically, how to get them back. Plus, people love saving money, so that just helps getting them back.
Yeah, that's it's one of those helpful things.
I mean, to-go stuff is great. Don't get me wrong, but people are coming here, like you said, brews and views. Like this is where, if you're having a beer here, it's a different experience than having it at home.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and beer is such a
It's communal.
yeah, and it's just like taking anything in that involves your senses. The environment that you're in enhances that. So if you're just sitting in your basement, dark, watching TV, that's a
I have to leave now.
Yeah, that's a little different than sitting here watching this, having a beer. I mean, it's a completely different experience. Not to say that it's wrong to sit in the dark watching TV.
Yeah, no, in Quebec, with the first lockdown, we pretty much had to spend 8 months in our basements watching TV. So we had some hardcore lockdowns where we were.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else either you'd like to talk about today?
No, I guess the only other thing I would mention is like a lot of our beers have like farm-grown ingredients that maybe are not grain. So we do a ton of herbal and floral additions.
Yeah.
Like we have a chamomile blonde coming. We have a lavender blonde coming out. Then we have a chamomile blonde coming out for like the fall time. It was one of our best sellers last year. We do a fennel stout. We're using nasturtiums and a saison. So we, huge flower person, but also support the bees and butterflies and pollinators, which is kind of what got me onto this whole idea of an herb garden. And really, an herb garden is a brewer's garden. And so we have expanded our like perennial herbs and floral additions into our beers, which they really do. You wouldn't think initially that they have this fragrance, and they really do add to the beers. And Duffy does a great job balancing them. Like you could have too much chamomile in a beer, let me tell you.
Oh yeah,
I've had them.
Oh, yeah.
But these is just like, I can smell it. I don't taste it, right?
Yeah.
Really,
Just
I'm
like a nice
smelling
little
it,
essence
and
of it.
it kind of makes me a little sleepy. And
Yeah,
so that's
that kind of jogged my memory a little bit. Going back to your question earlier, it was, what I like about this and why I think setups like this are really good for craft beer in general is because looking at like the whole foodie, craze.
Yeah.
And, if you go to a lot of other countries and it's still seasonal. And
you go to Italy, every region you go to, just like they eat something different than the next, right? Like it's local. You eat what your community produces. And
I think our palates, to that effect, have kind of waned a little bit, because it's like you're just kind of taught like, oh, you can get whatever you want year round. Like, no, I'm making this beer right now.
And our Norwood is like that.
Yeah, because like especially like the sours that we put the fruit in, that's the fruit that's in season. So that's the fruit I'm going to use. And you can't like, she convinced me, like I came from a larger scale thing, so it's like, oh, I have to use puree. You have to, and there's nothing wrong with puree, but she's like, listen, if you use real fresh fruit, you can taste the difference. You cannot, and I'm like, all right. And I was like, because me, I was being a little bit lazy about it. I'm like, it's so much harder cleaning up when you're using whole fruit rather than just a puree, So, but after that, after doing that once or twice, I was like, oh man, like there's no comparison.
That's why I like coming up to these farm style breweries. It's just such a change from the big city boy I come from, and it is that you can. Well, I still enjoy my craft beer in the city of Montreal and in the city of Toronto and in the city in New York City. I still like hitting places like this and other farm breweries around the area to get that nature in the glass.
Yeah, so. I mean, like our pumpkin ales, like they're not. Yeah. We're not getting jars of cans of pumpkin puree. Like that just isn't authentic. It isn't who we are. Mm-hmm. We're roasting pumpkins for 3 hours till they're caramelized, and then we're roasting their seeds till they're like coffee.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of extra work. We're doing it once a year.
Yeah. Do you do a pumpkin roast? Do you have people come in and do like a big pumpkin roast? I know
we did last year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we spoke with a distillery in Granby, Quebec, and they do a pumpkin. I want to say gin. I might be wrong. They do a distilled pumpkin hard alcohol, and he's like, yeah, no, we do like a big pumpkin roast for everybody to come in.
Yeah, that's cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I'd love that idea. And that's just add another event for people to show up and do stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, amazing. I mean, and the other thing too is brewing, it's a very, very, and it's an extremely old craft.
It's one of the oldest ones there.
It sparked civilization. Once people learned how to make beer, it's like, oh, we can sit. We can stay here. We don't have to go anywhere.
I mean, so you're talking Mesopotamia,
I found my
right?
yeast. I found my yeast strain. I'm staying.
Yeah. So to me, it's almost like a, again, an aspect of work life that I don't think a lot of people get to enjoy is like, and I think a lot of brewers to this point too don't truly respect this or even have. The cognizance of just the fact that this is a very old art and you're part of a tradition. Mm-hmm. So to me, doing things this way is as close to that old school tradition. I mean, there's some beers like specifically the Norwood. I looked into how did they make this hundreds of years ago. And obviously, I have better technology.
Like cutting spruce branches and pouring rain.
And it's just like, how can I, and doing that, and you have that connection. Like, man, I'm making a beer as close to authenticity as possible that people have been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that connection is just like you cannot mimic that any other way.
I mean, even speaking that hundreds of years ago, the alewives. Women were brewers
witches,
way back then.
Right? That's why they were witches.
When did the flip happen where it's like, this is just a man's drink and ladies can't drink it?
Yeah.
It is so ridiculous that is even a mindset at all.
Oh, so totally ridiculous.
Beer should be for everybody, except for children.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing about it. And that's another thing about it, too. Like, I'm trying, especially doing things on this scale in a setting like this, I'm trying to peel back some of the pretentiousness that you see a lot, like in the industry.
We have our group of customers that come here are incredibly diverse.
Yeah.
One of the things you don't see, I mean, a lot of it's upstate New York. You don't see a ton of minorities, but they will come here. Yeah. And we will see the guy that is most blue collar, right? Like us, people like us. They're farmers. And And then you'll see the person show up, and I'm not kidding you, Ferraris, Lamborghinis.
Yeah.
Like, I kid you not. I'm like, do you know where you
I'd be
are?
taking
You're
that
going to bottom out. And it's an incredibly diverse group of people who come here. And I think it's just because there's something here for everyone. And I think it goes back to, like, this really, it's just a very authentic brand and business model. Like, there's something here for everyone. And we want you to be part of the family. It's the farm family, right?
Plus having the 87 only about a mile away.
And that helps, right?
Super helpful. 'Cause I'm sure you get Montrealers traveling down, and they're like,
We get
"Ooh, what's
Montrealers
this?"
on
And-
bikes.
Yeah.
Like bicycles.
Yeah, no, I have a friend he's like, I did 100 kilometers. I'm like, that's 65 miles, dude. That's a lot of biking.
Yeah.
So that's not for me.
Yeah.
I'll drive. And then I enjoy responsibly, so I can drive after. Don't drink and drive for sure. Always have a designated driver, especially I'm assuming
Absolutely.
Uber's not here.
No,
so-
we can order you an Uber. It takes
Oh,
15
yeah?
minutes to get here. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. So even then, that's super helpful. So, what's the future for Dancing Grain?
Beer future is, I would say, I'd like to get into cool shipping and do some like wild stuff. I think we have an opportunity to do that here. We need a little bit more storage, though. Obviously, that's not watertight at the moment.
Oh, you mean the giant open slats?
Yeah, the
and
giant
everything?
open slabs in the barn. But other than that, I think like it's creating a space that's more year round. We are open year round, but we're small inside, so it's creating other spaces for people to come enjoy that's year round, and adding more reasons to be here. That's music, that's art, that's other breweries. We want to collaborate with people who are like-minded because we're always learning. We want to continue to learn, and we want to be kind of a center for other like breweries that are looking for ingredients that we use, right? Like we can sell our malts, we can sell our herbs and our flowers, like we can produce those at scale. So if there are like-minded people, they should look at us as a place to procure or at least collaborate with,
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's my.
I mean, I guess there's one last question as a Canadian who gets a lot of snow, and I'm sure you get a lot of snow here. Who does the dredge up the hill for the tractor to get rid of all the snow when there's a big snowstorm?
Me and my son.
Amazing.
Right.
Rachel, Duffy, thank you both very much for today. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Kick-ass brews and views. So
Thank you.
really like it. For those who are trying to find Dancing Grain, where can people find you?
Our address is 180 Old West Road in the town of Moreau, New York. We're about a mile off of I-87. Take exit 17.
And website and social media, please.
dancinggrain.com, and our socials are dancing_grain.
Okay. So we're going to add all that in the show notes. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for all future episodes. allbeerinside.com is the website. Add All Beer Inside on all social media. As you say at the end of all episodes, drink craft, not crap.